Hey folks, welcome back to the workshop. This is the first time I'm going to try do a voiceover instead of narrating in video, so I hope you enjoy. So last year we lost our Aunt Barbara and I wanted to make her an urn. Chose some really nice bits of whiskey barrel oak that I had, some Zebrano, some Tulip, some Spalted Beech, a Walnut, and then I wanted to make it pop, so I added some purple heart. Dialing in 15 degrees into the chop saw made it able to make completely repeatable cuts. I fitted a piece of tape which I could butt the wood up against to give me consistent segment lengths. But this process was probably the easiest part of it, to be honest. So to glue the pieces together, use these band clamps which work out really well. As you can probably see that I'm gluing these up in two halves. This will become obvious as to why a bit later. So once you've got glue applied, just literally tighten them up and then let them sit for a few hours. Push them all to the outside, just let them sit. I tried to make at least one side as flat as I possibly could, so I had at least one reference side to work from. And as you can probably tell, I had a fair amount of these to do, so I was busy gluing for a fair few days. Because unfortunately I only had 4 band clamps, which meant I could only really knock out 4 rings a day, because it would take a couple of hours for the segments to glue together and then a couple of hours for each of the halves. You can see I separated these ones with some sticks just to keep them separated. So yeah, I had probably 20 or so of these to do. It took a long time to cut and glue all of these up and then to sand them flat so they'd all fit together. When they come out of the band clamp, it's fairly easy just to offer these up to the disc sander, and that's just to draw a straight line across the two halves so they'll marry up together nicely. You can see here how well that comes out. It does make the ring a tiny little bit of an oval, but in general terms it's genuinely not that bad. And that's just a little bead of glue on the inside faces, and then back into the band clamp. And there you can see all the rings that I have done. That's why it took so long. So I needed to start mounting these to the lathe. So the first one had to go on, and it's important to try and get that as central as you possibly can. That just sort of sets you up for success later on as you add further and further rings. So I tried flattening these rings off on the lathe once they dried, but it was really difficult to get a flat surface on them, so I ended up taking these off and offering them up to the disc sander. It just seemed to work better. And you could start making the rings into circles now. Just finding out where you had material that you could remove. I made them fairly deep because it's the first time I've ever done segmenting work, so I didn't want to have to be too exact. I wanted to give myself plenty of fudge room, and as you can see here I'm round in some parts but not in others, so it's not quite a circle yet. But we'll soon fix that. And then we add more rings as we go until we've got a fairly decent shape. Now it does look fairly wobbly on here, but I assure you there's plenty of very high quality glue used. This isn't going anywhere. I wanted to tidy up the inside a bit, but not to the point where I was going to limit my options for the shaping of the outside. I didn't want to leave myself so little material that I couldn't choose a final shape on the outside, because it's the outside that you're going to see most of the time. So I wanted to make sure that I could get a really elegant shape out of it, out of the material that I had left over. And then that left me just to shape the outside, take the high spots off, wait until I got a cylinder, and then I could work it down into a shape that I was happy with. And then once I started to find that shape, it was just a case of refining the surface, getting it as smooth as I possibly could with a skew chisel. Now the way I've decided to build this is actually upside down, so the hole that you can see is actually going to be the bottom and the neck is closest to the lathe. So I needed to plug that hole at the bottom, so I used a piece of Acacia. And I just shaved that down till I had a flat surface. And then I put a tenon, or formed a tenon at the end, the exact same size as the opening that I had, so I could glue it and click it into place. But this took a fair few goes to get it exactly right, but once I got it right, it was a really nice, tight, snug fit. And then just used the back of the lathe to snap it into place. Okay, so this bottom now needed to be formed, and it does look like there's an awful lot of wood going to waste here, but having never done this before, I really wanted to be able to find the shape rather than be dictated to by how much wood I had left. I mean, imagine if I hadn't fitted one that was a plug that was big enough and I just had to work with what I had, so I thought better to go oversized and bring it down. I can always take wood away, it's very difficult to put wood back. It's just a case of, stopping every so often, seeing where the high spots are, seeing where you want the shape to go, and then just removing the excess material. This I genuinely really struggled with. It was really difficult to try and keep the outer diameter of the urn going through the bottom, as I married those two pieces together. And then it was a case of having to bring the parting chisel in, start to part that off, and then when I got down to a reasonable thickness I could use the Japanese pull saw and get that out. Did leave a bit of a mess on the top from where it was glued to the cherry block, but a few turns on the lathe would remove that excess. And that was the bottom part done. So next was the lid, and the lid I'd already formed on a scrap block of ply. this I mounted this way round so I could make the internal diameter of the top nice and round, so I could glue what was essentially going to be the top bung in already before I needed to turn this over. And yeah, you would not believe, for what looks like a small amount of wood, the amount of wood chips that this project produced was incredible. But having said that, they were much prettier than what I would normally produce. All the different colours came out. The darkness of the Zebrano, brown of the walnut, and then the bright white of the beech, and the purple heart. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful wood shavings. Apologies for this shot. Every time I brought my tool rest up, my light came with it, and for whatever reason my camera just latched onto my light. So I'm just gluing the top part in. Because I fitted a faceplate onto the other side which connects to the lathe, I can now hold the entire thing by the other end. Turn that plywood base off, remove that, and then I can start to work on the shape. So I'm just starting to reduce the width and the thickness of that plywood base and expose the rings underneath. And there we are, nearly all gone. I wanted to try and leave as much of the good wood on there, so I didn't want to take them down too much. But now I can start shaping the outside, trying to come up with some sort of final form, trying to find some shape in there. Okay, so I glued a block of cherry onto the bottom, and this is going to form the tenon that connects the lid to the body of the urn. So just turning this down into a cylinder and then make it an appropriate depth so that it's plenty secure when it sits on top. I'm just bringing down the circumference a little bit because at the moment it's too wide to fit inside the neck of the urn. But this had to be, I had to get close and then really try and sneak up on it, because one thing I didn't want is I didn't want the lid to be loose on the top of the urn. That would have sucked. And you can see there it's slightly too wide, so just take another shaving off. But you have to remember that what you take off of one side is already been taken off of the other, so little steps. And there it fits quite nicely. It is tapered ever so slightly, so the very top of it allows you to locate it, and then as you push it further in, it just sort of snaps shut right at the end. So I made a little recess for my name badge. No, you're not ever going to see that. I know it's there. I like to mark everything that I do. And now it's time to grab a hold of the cherry bung at the end and then turn this lid down. Again, I'd rather start off with a much bigger piece of wood than I actually needed, so I can really find the form within it rather than be constrained by what material I had. For something this important, I was more than happy to use, a few wood blanks more than I actually needed, just so I didn't have to do it again, and I wanted it to look right, so it was worth the expenditure. So I put the two together, I took a look at it, and it really needed a finial just to sort of finish it off. So I found some really dark black wood which had like a lovely brown grain going through it. And I thought about different types of finials, but I thought, no, do you know what, actually something that sort of resembled a minstrel would really look nice. And once that was on, I think you'll agree that that's a really nice piece. The orange of the tulip in there is just beautiful. The purple heart just really sets it off. I think it's gorgeous. I'm really, really pleased with it. It's genuinely one of the most beautiful things I've ever created.